All right, what is up, friends? Hope you all are staying safe out there. As always, it is a hard time if you are a Bitcoin bull. We have seen just major downside over the last 10-day periods, and really since September 28th is when we saw our all-time high. We're down about 35%. Let's take a look at this. 36% since our all-time high from wick to wick. This morning, as I was starting the video, we were pulling into the 80K area, and then we saw a very nice bounce from that area. So I think I'm going to add a dotted midline to our support 1 zone for our support and resistance, because you do oftentimes see major wicks come in off of those points, just like you see a lot of times at least support and resistance hold off of those dotted midlines. At least for a while, you might see a few wicks above and below, but those are very much points of interest. So pretty soon I'm going to add a dotted midline to our support and resistance 3 zones there, or between support and resistance 2 and 3. All right, so that's just some thoughts for the future, but we did see a nice wick off of that. The last time we saw that happen, interesting enough, was in our major bear dump off from this would have been June of 2022. So we really have not seen this kind of behavior since the bear market was almost over. Interestingly enough, the bear market, I mean, I don't know if you could call it necessarily over, because we did see sideways from there, but from that wick to the dotted, where the dotted midline would be in this zone, we only saw a small drop. Now this is over a 10-day time frame, so it's going to be a good 12% drop. We saw about 12% lower than that wick ended up being, but that was largely the low for the time being, and you did see a pretty incredible bounce. Let's kind of look at this in percentage term. We saw about a 40% bounce, which is nothing to bat an eye at, up into the support 1 band, and then we saw again kind of bouncing back and forth between the dotted midline and the support. We almost saw it up to the midline one more time, but so we did find after that bounce, the dotted midline for the 10-day time frame was mostly support. Now it did drop over time, of course, as it created a base for Bitcoin, but then after that we saw a nice run to the upside. Now that did also, let's kind of look from as far as time goes, how long it took to really see the final flush out. It took about 16 bars before we saw the final flush out, and then another 7 or 8 bars before we saw the actual lows being in the bull market start. So that's quite a long period of time. Again, if we're looking at the same kind of thing, that would be in April to June of 26. So that we do have quite a long period here that Bitcoin could put in a base and a little bit lower. I mean, if we see Bitcoin go, a good, what was it? I forgot. I think about 12% lower. That's in the 71K area. So it's actually very interesting to see that, because I was looking at the monthly time frame, and we're going to look at that, but there's a bit of confluence there. So all this to say, I do think that whether we see a small push back down to the 80K areas, even the mid 70 area, I do expect this to be a pretty major low before we see a bounce. And if we see a bounce up into this support 1 band, that's going to be 104K as of now. Now it will probably drop over time. Now if we take about 2 bars out, that's probably going to be in about the 100K area, maybe 102. But we have seen our major flush out happen. We saw our target get hit to the 81.5. It's actually funny because it's like almost exactly, I guess it's about 1K lower. Bitcoin went about 1K lower, but it's incredibly accurate, this ribbon momentum oscillator on the 10-day time frame. So we have seen much of this play out. Our duration is we're over duration by 1 bar. So I do expect somewhere around here to be the low. We're hitting major extremes on separation, which means just flush out moves generally push the ribbon momentum oscillator itself far below the signal line, and then it will mean revert slowly into that signal line. So our separation is largely over. Our oscillator level is over. So as far as just a general bias on the 10-day time frame, I do expect this to slowly make its way to the upside. Now it could take a good 3 to 5 to even, like we said, 10 bars on the monthly time frame. Again, we're seeing some pretty extreme drops. We have not seen for a very long time. The last time we saw a test into the dotted support was our bear market and about May 1st of 2022. Okay, so this is the last time we saw a test into that. Now, to be fair, we did see a pretty one more major drop before our lows were basically in on the monthly candle, on monthly time frame. But we did see a nice bounce. So off of that, the dotted midline, we saw about a 20% bounce on closure, before closure even. So it probably bounced a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure how far it bounced up before the closure, but the closure closed about 20% above that, and then it did see a pretty major drop after that, before the lows were in, and that tested almost the support 2 band. So support 2 band, I do think, will be at the absolute worst case scenario. And over time, Bitcoin did drop a little bit lower than this. Let's see, as far as the wick goes, it had a pretty major, it had about 38% drop from the wick. So that was a, to be fair, I guess if we see 38% drop from here, that's going to be pretty painful. But we'll see what happens. We'll see where the ribbons end up. But we did see a 20% bounce from there, finally found the lows, and then, made its way up from there. The funny thing is, this also took quite a long period of time. So, before the lows were actually in, it was about 5 bars, which is about 5 months. And the interesting thing on this move, we have about 6 bars left. So between 5 and 6 months from here, again, I think that's a lot of confluence with the 10-day time frame. Could be all the way into May or June of next year before we see a low actually in. Now, do we see it go down and test the support 2 band? Possibly. That's about 69K area right here if it continues. Now, I don't know if that's going to go a bit more sideways, going to slowly go up and down, and we'll see where that ends up when all is said and done. But this being said, I do expect, if we see a 20% bounce off of that wick there, it's going to be back into the 96K area. We were talking about in the video the other day that the midline would be a nice place for a bounce, and that is about 102K area. So where that ends up again in another month, when price actually has a bounce, it could be around 102K area, it could be about 100K area, it could be 98. But that area in general, I do expect to see a bounce come in. On the monthly time frame, we do have a short-term target all the way up to 110. But on a monthly time frame, there's really not enough data to pull from for this to be what I would consider very trustable. So, yeah, we do expect a bounce soon. I don't expect it to go that high. Price move, I don't know how accurate this will be, but the price move on a major wick, I suppose we could see about 60K, which would be, that would be pretty gnarly. From where we're at right now, 60K is about 30%. So I guess there's a bit of confluence there with if we see that kind of major low. I do expect that to take a few months if we see that happen. So maybe we bounce up in the interim. If we bounce at all, nothing is promised, but of course I do expect a bounce coming here pretty soon. So that's the monthly time frame. A lot of interesting stuff based off of that, and the 10-day time frame. And let's look at a few other. I'm going to look at the 2-hour time frame here. We have a strategy that I posted recently. We do see that price will soon push this to cross to the upside. Now it's saying 84.9K is the target. It needs to cross to the upside. We're about at 84.8. So anywhere in the next bar or two, I do expect the 2-hour time frame to cross to the upside. And on that, as long as the width percentile is in the correct positioning, we will get a trade entering for a 2-hour time frame. And I do expect a nice bounce to come in from here. So we'll see what happens in the next 2 hours, because we got about an hour and 58 minutes left before this closes. But I do expect here very, very soon for this to cross to the upside. Now we do see we're overextended here on the duration and the price move, or we're not quite overextended on the duration. We have 1 bar left, which will be just the average amount, and then a price move up to 85K is the average for a cross to the downside. So we are just at the levels we want to be seeing for a nice cross to the upside. All right, let's look at the 2 indicators that I was speaking of earlier that are going to be available here coming up very soon. I'll make a dedicated video on these sooner or later, but I will. All All right, let's look at the two indicators that I was talking about earlier in the video that will be available very, very soon. These indicators are pretty unique, and I really like them a lot, actually. You can build some pretty solid strategies out of them. You can see the strategy. It's pretty unreal. However, it's obviously back-tested a long way, so this is since 2016, and it's currently at 3x leverage. Even at 3x leverage, though, the drawdown is just really, really low. So the way I think about drawdown and leveraging, and I think it's important for any strategy to be able to withstand the actual leverage you're trading at and not get liquidated. And also, it's important to be able to beat, buy, and hold, because then otherwise, why would you not just buy and hold Bitcoin and not even worry about trading? Okay, so this is the way I think about it. If I was to trade the strategy from the absolute worst possible peak or highest peak to the lowest valley, so the worst period of time, what would my drawdown be at actual realistic leverage? And if I was to hold Bitcoin from its peak to valley, what would that be? And it's not necessarily the same place, because sometimes Bitcoin will peak in one place, the strategy will peak in a different place. But we're just looking at worst case scenarios, then we can look at best case scenarios. But it's more important to know worst case scenarios, because oftentimes we don't start trading strategies in the best case scenario. In fact, a lot of people start trading strategies or buying and holding Bitcoin in the most hype periods of the market. So recently here, Bitcoin has gone on about 30-something% dump. Let's see, from wick to low, about 36%. So if you were to hold Bitcoin at 3x leverage from the worst period, even recently, not the worst period in history, but the worst period recently, you would be liquidated at 3x leverage. If you were to trade the strategy from its worst period, and let's look at the last just couple years. I really think it's important to do this over lots of different periods of time. But let's just look at the last 2 years. So almost 2 full years since 2024. Again, buying and holding Bitcoin, we know that we've seen probably some about the same, maybe some worse drawdowns than 35%. So our worst case scenario buy and hold in the last 2 years is at least 35%. Our worst case trading the strategy at 3x leverage is, I actually need to restate that. So it is apples to apples. So it's over 100% at 3x leverage if you bought and held Bitcoin from the worst place. If you traded the strategy from the worst case scenario, it's actually more than 20%, but it's closer to 30%. So it's 110 to 75. So that would be about 35% at 3x leverage, which is not fun. It's definitely not fun. And there's been a lot of period of sideways. However, it definitely beats the being liquidated over 100% drawdown if you're holding in Bitcoin at 3x leverage. So we can see that this strategy is safer. Currently, this is not financial advice. To each their own. You must research and make your own decisions, because at any point, random shit can happen. But this is absolutely staying out of the market and avoiding some of the nasty downside. You can't see here recently, it did lose a trade, the last trade, but it avoided, this is a long strategy, and it avoided that whole downside period. The trade before that actually got out at a very, very small profit. It hit the stop loss and then closed above it. So the strategy will lose about half the trades or win about half the trades, but it is a pretty reasonable strategy to be trading on a daily time frame, having a decent drawdown even at 3x leverage. You could go up to 4 or 5x leverage, but I don't recommend that at all. Yeah, so this is a strategy built on these two indicators. I find it pretty valuable and powerful. It has a great profit factor, an average, profitable trades, a pretty great drawdown for 3x leverage. It doesn't trade a lot, so that's another thing. It only trades about 15 times a year, which is pretty small, so it's definitely for much more long-term minded. But it does have a nice equity curve and has avoided some of these just nasty downsides. The other thing about it is there's a lot of places you can get out of the strategy at better profit. So there probably could be a bit more optimization on this. I just, threw a strategy together really quickly. But this strategy held Bitcoin all the way from 109 up to 125, then back down to 113. So this could have, easily gotten out at a nice win there, and a lot of other places it can. So, okay, let's look at the last strategy. This is a short strategy. Again, this backtest is since January 7th of 2022. You can backtest it from many other places. 2023 is actually where it really started to be majorly profitable. It was nicely profitable over this period of time here, but it's really caught in some wind since 2023, mid 2023, and is even since the beginning of 2024. where is that? Right here, it's up really decently since 2024, 2025. So every year is has some nice gains on it. It does lose a lot of trades, and that's because it has a limit stop loss at 0.84. So it's gonna hit that stop loss super often, but it has a great drawdown. I believe this is at 3x leverage already. Yeah, it's at 3x leverage. The commissions can probably be actually even a bit better than that, because again, you can get in at limit entries and exits because it hits that limit exit so often. Or you can adjust that limit exit and get out at maybe you'll lose less trades, but it'll be a little bit more risk here and there. A lot of ways this strategy can be optimized, but again, using the same two indicators, having a really nice short strategy on Bitcoin. And yes, it's a slow grind. This one has a lot more trades, but that's first of all because it loses a lot of it exits a lot of trades, and it does lose a lot of trades that Bitcoin is actually headed in the right direction. You can even see here recently it had a pretty nice win followed by a few losses because the stop loss is so tight. So as soon as it wicks up a little bit, it's going to hit that stop loss. So again, this can be optimized probably a decent amount. This is kind of just a really quick take at a short strategy using these indicators. Again, these will be available for those users who are sticking around, and over the next couple weeks, these will be available. So, all right, I'm gonna wrap the video up there. Hope you guys stay safe, enjoy it. Let's go into this Christmas season with bright spirits. Even though Bitcoin is down, there's some hope on the horizon. I will see you guys in the next video.